Hi, welcome to my video on deriving the quadratic formula. Deriving the quadratic formula, I'm going to call it QF for quadratic, for Q for quadratic and F for formula. The standard form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is not 0. And remember, if a is 0, then the x squared term disappears and you only have a linear. So we're going to solve ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0 by completing the square. And completing the square, we moved the c, which is the constant, to the right side. I want to remind, in order to complete this exercise that I'm doing, you need to have command of the unit on rational expressions, that is, adding and subtracting rational expressions with common denominators, etc. You need to review that unit first. If not, you might have trouble understanding what we're doing here. So completing the square, we move c over to make negative c. We divide all terms by a because we want a 1 coefficient. It cancels out. So I get x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. Now we're going to make it a perfect square trinomial. So what we're going to do is take a half of this is b over a now, so it's a half times b over a squared. So that it becomes b over 2a squared, which is b over 2a times b over 2a, which is b squared over 4a squared. So to complete the square, I have to add on b squared plus add on b squared over 4a squared. And I have to add that on to both sides to balance it, just like we did when we solved the equations before. But now we got all, instead of numbers, we have all variables, a's, b's, and x's. So we're still doing the same thing. This factors into x plus, and whatever is right here before you square it, that's what goes here. So a half of b over a is b over 2a, squared as a factorization. Now we're going to simplify the subtraction of these two expressions here. And because I have a subtraction, I'm going to add on the opposite. That's what I did in the unit on rational expressions. When you're subtracting fractions, you add on the opposite. And now we need a common denominator, so the LCD for 4a squared and a is 4a squared. That means I have to multiply this denominator by 4a, and I multiply the numerator, put 4a over 4a to balance it, 4a squared. That's an a, so oops, I need just 4a, sorry, because a times 4a gives me 4a squared. So 4a over 4a, that makes it b squared all over 4a squared, add on negative 4ac all over 4a squared. So let's continue. The left side stays as it is with the square, and we're still simplifying the right side. So again, I need a common denominator, which is 4a squared, so I multiplied a by 4a to get 4a squared. And I put 4a on the top, and there's this fraction right here, negative 4ac all over 4a squared is the same as multiplying these two with the same denominator. Now I have a common denominator, so I'll write it down. So I keep the denominators of 4a squared, and I get a b squared minus 4ac. And the next step is I'll do the square root of both sides. So I got a x plus b over 2a squared equals, again we got to do the plus minus, the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. The square root of x plus b over 2a all squared is x plus b over 2a plus minus. Now, the square root here, let's look at it, is b squared minus 4a squared all over the square root of 4a squared. So instead of writing all this down here, I'm taking the square root of the top, which I can't do. I can't simplify it, so I leave it as b squared minus 4ac. But the square root of 4a squared is a 2a. Now let's continue. So now we have to bring this negative b over 2a goes to the left side to become negative, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And x equals, notice that these two have the same denominator of 2a, so I'll put a 2a right there, same denominator. And the numerator becomes negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And that's what we call the quadratic formula, which I'm going to do in the next video, many examples of working out the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is used to solve an equation of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And repeat, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over, notice the line goes right on through, all over 2a. And that's a formula that you have to memorize and will be used again and again and again. The standard equation of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is not 0 if you want a quadratic. Just reviewing it now. To solve this standard form, the quadratic formula is used, and the quadratic formula is, I'm going to call it QF. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that's the quadratic formula that I've used over and over and over many times. So memorize it, learn it, write it down till you know it. Have to memorize it. Thank you very much for viewing my video on deriving quadratic formula that is used to solve any quadratic equation. Thank you very much for viewing my video. Bye-bye.